On the broadcast tonight, police on the hunt for brazen daylight shooters.
Also ahead, implementing that in the Bahamas and the impact it could have on the region.
And then a slippery slide with me. We cap off a week of fun at Atlantis. The Bahamas Tonight. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
Man is in police custody, and police are on the hunt for two others believed to be involved in a shooting which took place in broad daylight in the Yellow Elder Gardens area today. Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Andrew Knowles, and we're coming to you live from Marina Village here at Atlantis. Now, that shooting taking place for a stone's throw away from the Dandelion preschool around 10 this morning. Police say that a male of Nichols Estate was standing outside of his home when the occupants of a vehicle drove by and opened fire on him, hitting him 3 times about the body. The victim was taken to hospital and at last report was listed in critical condition. Superintendent of Police Paul Rowe says officers captured one of the male suspects on a jitney on East Street after they received information that one of the men involved in the shooting fled the area by bus.
A male was standing at the front of his residence when persons drove up in a small white, we believe Nissan type vehicle, discharged several shots in his direction, hitting this male twice, we believe, to the chest and once to the head. His family members drove him to the Princess Margaret Hospital to seek medical attention, and he is presently in theater where medics are trying to save his life.
Now, Roll also gave an update on the conditions of 2 members of the Blair family who were shot in their home during an apparent armed robbery. Roll says Judith Blair and her son Marvin are recuperating in hospital as police continue their search for one of the suspects, Adrian Stubbs, who is believed to be involved. That shooting happened near 2 churches and a recreation area for children. And today's shooting happened near a preschool. Now, Mr. Roll says police are deeply concerned about that.
Always say we are concerned when persons are perpetrating these acts, bearing in mind that they don't seem to take into account the locale of these instances. It seems to be a matter of having a disregard for the systems that are set up to deal with disputes. And yes, it is very careless of them when you do things like that, and it's always a concern for us.
In news from the court, 21-year-old Rumel Gray of William Street and Stanley Key Exuma was arraigned before Magistrate Andrew Forbes, accused of the February 4th, 2013 murder of Sean Munnings. Gray, who was deported from the United States earlier this week, was not required to enter a plea to the charge. He was remanded to Her Majesty's prison, and his case was adjourned to February 19th.
A jury has cleared 27-year-old Donnie Saunders of a rape charge. Saunders was accused of raping a mother of 5 at her Wolf Road home during the early morning hours of February of 2012. But Saunders maintained his innocence, claiming he was on his way home from work at the time. Now, jurors apparently believed his story, finding him not guilty of rape following deliberations this afternoon. The court also left jurors to consider the lesser charge of indecent assault, but they returned a not guilty verdict on that count as well. Attorney Bernard Ferguson defended Saunders. Basil Cumberbatch appeared on behalf of the Crown, and Justice Bernard Turner presided over the case.
The prosecution has closed its case in the Javan Colebrook murder trial. Colebrook is accused of killing Lyndon Bethel Jr. back in October of 2010 outside the Illusions nightclub on East Bay Street. During today's proceedings, the court heard from PMH pathologist Dr. Karen Sands, who testified that Bethel died from a stab wound to his right shoulder. She explained that the wound, which appeared to be inflicted by a sharp-edged weapon, injured a major blood vessel in Bethel's right upper arm, causing major bleeding. She determined that Bethel died in a matter of minutes as a result. Attorney Ty Pinder is defending Colebrook. Darnell Dorset and Charles Newbold III are appearing on behalf of the Crown. Justice Vera Watkins is presiding. Well, in 5 months, the Bahamas is likely to introduce a value-added tax system as the government seeks to reform its current tax structure.
Now, it's a move that regional economists and leaders are keeping a close eye on, as the Bahamas economy, like those in the region, are expected to improve this year with changes to the global market.
But what impact will VAT have on the Bahamian economy as compared to the region?
Our Betty Thompson-Moss speaks with regional experts.
The new tax regime is not new to the region, and Caribbean economists and bank officials view VAT as a welcome move in terms of revenue enhancement for any government. Behind me, Ministry of Finance officials are busy finalizing the new tax regime. For the Bahamas, VAT is being proposed at 15%. Director of the Economics Department at the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Justin Ram, points out the benefits for the Bahamas.
What's actually very useful about value-added tax is that it's applied on the value added with respect of production. And in that way, this actually improves efficiency of the economy going forward, so that the tax rate at the level of 15%, I would imagine that the government of Bahamas would have done its analysis and would have come up with this particular figure, which would have suggested that this was a figure that was necessary to raise the level of taxes or the revenues that they equate to be necessary to run their expenditure programs, but it would also be the level of tax rate that would not have a dampening impact on business activity, let's say, or economic activity within the country.
Now, he says, initially one of the main downfalls may be short-term inflation as a new tax is added to a bill. But generally, he feels VAT could improve national revenue intake.
I think that if you look at most economies that are performing well, you find that value-added tax is an efficient way of raising revenue, because it is based on the value-added as well as the consumption patterns of the entire economy, as it were. It means that all persons within the Bahamian economy would be subjected to paying some of this value-added tax.
Value-added tax is already widespread in the region. It was introduced in Trinidad in the 1980s, in Barbados in 1997, and St. Lucia in 2012, providing a good line of revenue.
Why is it attractive for governments? Because, well, during the course of any year, you're going to have consumers of goods and services. And so it is likely that value-added tax will be a line item in the revenue stream, which will be maintained over time.
The value-added tax is applied on a number of goods in Barbados, including food items and other services. For example, the cost of an extra luggage on American Airlines into Barbados is $40. But a passenger will pay $47 departing Barbados because of value-added tax. And the debate continues on the implementation of the value-added tax for the Bahamas. The government says it is now open to the views of private sector groups opposing the implementation of the value-added tax. Betty Thompson-Moss, ZNS Network News.
In about 5 months' time, the government is expected to implement value-added tax. However, coalition groups like the Citizens for Responsible Taxation are appealing to the government to push the implementation date back and allow for more research.
And it's appealing to citizens to wake up and demand the facts on VAT. Jimenita Swain has both sides. Government and the coalition whose support is in the thousands.
We do have an agenda we're trying to push. It's to make sure that the economy remains robust.
The lobbyist group Wake Up Bahamas mobilized September to get support for a push for the government to delay the July VAT implementation deadline. Co-chairman Robert Myers said VAT cannot be the only thing relied on to generate revenue, but overall fiscal reform, and that means lowering the $5 billion national debt.
We've put out alternative taxes that total somewhere around $700 or $800 million a year. The responsible thing to do is to also run those alternatives through the dynamic modeling to see what effect they have on the economy.
Myers suggested a payroll tax as one of those alternatives. However, Minister of State for Finance Michael Alcides said that there are drawbacks, but government is listening.
Disposable income, that is the argument against the payroll tax, because what happens is that comes out of your income at the beginning. But the position that the government has taken is, and this was enunciated by the Prime Minister, is that we are prepared to listen to alternatives. And that's genuinely listening to alternatives.
Wake Up Bahamas has secured more than 5,000 signatures on its petition to delay VAT, and Myers said those numbers include 700 businesses and more than 70,000 employees. He said the group is continuing its research on VAT and alternatives to assist government.
We've given you these alternatives. We've given you the fiscal reform ideas. Now, what are you going to do about them? Are you going to participate with us in the dynamic modeling? So we now are at a point where we need to get some answers back from the government. All is in their court. They have to decide whether they want to pick it up or not.
And we welcome the discussion, but we're listening for alternatives. I know one of the private sector groups is undertaking an independent study that would be collaborating with them. We've committed to provide information to assist them in completing it. Everybody who talks about this issue says, yes, we understand something needs to be done. And we have to do it, because if we further delay, if we put it off, a future generation will have to deal with the problem.
Overall, Myers said they will lobby until they get their desired result, but they just want government to be responsible in whatever tax system is implemented, because it will have a direct result on the economy.
We go into a recession or a cooling, you're going to see drops in employment. We're already seeing that. So employment is going to drop, without a doubt. And likely employment will drop continually until the right decision is made.
The Bahamas Union of Teachers was just the latest group calling for a VAT implementation deadline. These groups are hoping government listens to them crying out and delays the July 1st VAT implementation deadline. Chiminita Swain, ZNS Network News.
PLP Chairman Bradley Roberts is responding to opposition critics of the government's mid-year budget. He noted that government inherited a fiscal crisis by any objective measure, where the country's recurrent revenue was underperforming by more than $200 million and capital expenditure exceeded the budgeted amount by more than $200 million. Mr. Roberts said this sad but real fiscal state of affairs placed extraordinary pressure on public finances and the government's ability to meet its commitments to fund its operations. He added that further, and through no fault of its own, the government was greeted with a downgrade of the country's sovereign credit rating due to the unsustainable levels of borrowing and spending over the previous 5 years by the previous administration. He said this quality of fiscal stewardship can only be branded as reckless and irresponsible. Mr. Roberts said the PLP government was hired by the Bahamian people May 7 to clean up the fiscal mess left behind by the former administration.
The news is brought to you by Shell Quality Fuels.